why don't you share with us what we're going to be talking about today?
So today we're going to be talking about stress in the thick of motherhood. Motherhood is just such an interesting chapter in our lives, and the fact that you can't really turn off the stress.
Yeah.
Sleepless nights are kind of inevitable. The stress between getting kids to school and after school and sports, or if you just have a baby and you have a toddler, all of this different forms of stress that appear in our lives and how they manifest. You can't just shut that off. So how do we build resiliency through nutrition and some lifestyle practice to where, you can feel more resilient, more capable and able to handle what's thrown your way?
I am so excited for this because especially as a practitioner who does not have kids, I have a very hard time finding tangible things and ways to help reduce and improve some of that stress management, because in my head, I think exactly that is the stress is nonstop and good and bad, right? There's both types of stressors, but it's to say, how do I get rid of your kid? Or how do I get sleep better? You don't want that. And now I need something more tangible to work on. So I'm very excited about this.
Yeah, no, I am too. This is the biggest roadblock I see in my clients' lives. It's the biggest roadblock that I experience. I think people have this expectation that I have it all together, and they're like, oh, you must eat so well and you must feel great all the time. I'm like, no, I still have nightmares and don't sleep just like you.
Yeah.
So this is one of my favorite discussions because it's something that I'm still learning to apply well in my life, and some weeks are better than others, but then also in my clients. And I think in anybody's life, having the grace to extend to yourself that some weeks, you're going to have the capacity to help build your resiliency. And other weeks, you're just going to be eating Cheetos and whatever else you can grab. And that's your bandwidth, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So wherever you're at, it's okay.
I love that phrasing, capacity to build resiliency. That's helpful. What might be I know this sounds silly, but what might be some stressors or that you've heard clients come in and say commonly besides, I just feel stressed? Are there things that people might be experiencing as signs or symptoms that they might not identify or attribute to signs of stress?
That's a really good question. Yes, some of the big manifestations of stress that I see that maybe you don't realize is, of course, the first one would be anxiety, heightened depression, heightened mood disorders, insomnia. Even if let's just say your baby is finally sleeping through the night, but you're not, that could be a sign that your body is experiencing too much stress still. But some other really hidden, surprising ones are, let's just say in the middle of the afternoon, you get kind of a slump in your energy, or you feel hangry all the time. If you don't eat breakfast or you don't eat meals consistently, then you're just kind of turned into this other, irritable person. But then something else is digestion. I see it manifest in digestion all the time. And that can be from bloating. It can be flatulence. It could be diarrhea, constipation. Even frequent urination can all be heightened with stress. And so a lot of and the thing is, digestive symptoms are so broad, and it could be one of 1,000 things. And I think, making sure that you have professionals in your life and making sure your pelvic floor is happy and healthy and making sure that's not contributing to your symptoms is really important. But stress is definitely one of those factors.
Super helpful. And I've really enjoyed doing research and just learning more about how, so I think so many of our stressors and chemicals that are responsible for stress take place in our gut and GI system. So more often than not, I try to at least just do broad education with people to say, there's a lot of stress going on in your life right now. How can we help mediate that? And I'm not the best person for it, but certainly I feel like the foods that we're putting in over a long period of time can really affect what's happening, because some of those chemicals are made in our intestines, and we don't think about that. I think we consider all of that happening in our brain as kind of this totally separate thing that I can't affect or change.
Right. You're absolutely right. It's easy to think that all of these other parts of our body are separate, but everything is integrated. There's something that's called the gut-brain axis, and they're finding out that in the small intestine and even certain parts of your lower esophagus, there's actually the same tissue that you would find in your brain.
So cool.
It's mind-blowing, really.
Yeah, I love it.
And so you know, there is a direct correlation between our brain and our guts, not only just in the tissue, but there's a neurotransmitter called GABA, and that's one of the neurotransmitters that's really responsible to how we feel whenever we're like too excited, like we're too stimulated, and you feel like overwhelmed and overburdened. GABA is a neurotransmitter that can just kind of dial it back a little bit. And GABA does other things, but just like the best way to describe it, it just can kind of take that overstimulated, anxious, where you just feel like your brain is just running like kind of on a hamster wheel. GABA is the kind of the antidote for that. But GABA, the majority of GABA is actually produced in our gut. It's not produced in our brain. And so what's just so incredibly fascinating is what actually produces the GABA is our good gut flora.
Wow.
And so the microbiome, which is basically the flora in your body, it's not just in your gut. It's going to be found in your eyes, on your skin, in your mouth, in the back of your throat, your lungs. So the entire ecosystem of good and bad pathogens is called the microbiome.
Okay. And that's what you're saying is all of those places you talked about. Big picture microbiome. Okay.
Big picture microbiome. But what's actually making the GABA is going to be the microbiome, specifically in the gut.
Gotcha.
And so kind of to describe this, it's like, let's just say the microbiome specifically in the digestive system is like a neighborhood. You're going to have some really wonderful neighbors that are going to be able to give, you know, lend you some eggs or help you patch up your roof if something happens to it. Those are the friendly ones. And then you have the rowdy lot. And those are the ones that play the music too loud, or they're going to be playing Tejano music and they don't invite you over to go party with them. Like, those are the rowdy neighbors. And so you want to make sure that there's a balance. And so, and just like with our good and bad bacteria, our microbiome is not only just going to have the beneficial bacteria or the bad. It's whenever there's not a balance and one kind of overpowers the other. And so
because you're saying both are important to have.
They are. They're both important to have. I mean, ideally, you'd want to have more beneficial than not.
Gotcha.
But, I mean, just in a perfect world, I mean, the food, for example, the food that we eat is not sterile. You know, a lot of our immune system's in our gut because, I mean, the food that we eat, yes, even though it's cooked, it's not going to be like completely sterile and void.
I see what you're saying.
Sick. So there's always going to be exposure.
To say it's inevitable, we're going to have both, but we're going to try to always shoot to have more of that good microbiome.
Yeah. And so like some really good action steps for that is that a lot of people will start drinking or eating fermented foods. And so you can do that. You can do fermented foods. You can do a probiotic supplement. But really, what I tell all of my clients is to think of your digestive system like a north to south process. You know, your digestive system is more than just your stomach or your small intestine or your large intestine. It actually starts in the brain. Every time you see food that's being prepared or you smell it, like that sizzle, and you can hear it, your brain can perceive and knows that you're probably going to be eating soon. So then it communicates to your digestive system to start producing enzymes. And so it's going to tell your stomach to start producing enzymes that are going to be breaking down that food. But something else that happens, so it starts in the brain. So the brain communicates first to the gut to start making enzymes. Hey, you're going to be eating soon. Let's go ahead and get ready. But that communication can get halted, and it may not be as effective if you're stressed. Because our nervous system has two different states. We have like the rest and digest state, and we have the fight and flight, or you can call it the parasympathetic state, which is that calm state, or sympathetic state, which is that fight or flight, that more stimulated, that more stressed. And every metabolic process, nearly every metabolic process in our body, can only happen in one or the other, one side of your digestive system. So either the calm, rest and digest, or that fight or flight. And digestive enzymes cannot be produced. So basically your stomach or your body will not start the digestive process if you're stressed.
So fascinating.
It's physiologically impossible. Like, you can make it happen. You can take enzymes, you can take a supplement, you can eat food. But basically what happens is, like, our stomach, it's supposed to be this really acidic environment with all these enzymes. And those enzymes are what break down the food into a liquid, to where then at that point you can go further down into the small intestine to where we can start that absorption, that nutrient absorption process and further breakdown. But if we're stressed and our stomach isn't acidic enough because we're not producing enough digestive enzymes because we're eating really quickly, like, so we're not chewing our food well, or we're stressed, so never even have the opportunity to start making enzymes. So let's just say you're driving down the road and you're scarfing something down, or
Never
you
done
don't
that
have the
before.
proper nutrients needed to make hydrochloric acid or these other enzymes. You need zinc, you need different B vitamins to make these enzymes. So it could be a nutrient issue. At that point, so what happens is like your stomach's like a balloon. And what's supposed to happen is that's supposed to become acidic enough. So you put in all this food, the enzymes are being produced, they're all churning together, the enzymes are breaking it down, and it's supposed to reach a certain pH. And once it reaches a certain pH, there's actually receptor sites at basically the little doorway between our stomach and small intestine where it says, it's finally acidic enough, we're great. So let's go ahead and open up that sphincter, open up that door to where that food can drop down into the small intestine. But if that doesn't happen because it never reached that pH to begin with, that's whenever we can experience symptoms like bloating and gas or even heartburn, because basically your stomach can only expand so much and that food has to go somewhere. So sometimes it'll actually kind of creep up back into the esophagus and cause symptoms of heartburn. But then also it's like, have you ever left like a smoothie in the hot car in the middle of the summer and it starts to putrefy, like it bubbles a bit and it stinks and it's kind of like it's expanded? That can happen in the gut. And so that the extra gas causes the flatulence, it causes the sour breath. And so supporting digestion just by simply taking a few deep breaths before eating can help put your nervous system into a better state that's more likely, where your stomach can start producing those enzymes, more likely to be in that rest and digest state. One of the big things I tell my clients is like, your mom may not be able to have this beautiful meal with candles and like this like old glass of wine and this beautiful music playing. Like you're more than likely just arguing with your toddler about them not eating their food. Or you just got off the phone with your husband and he forgot to get something at the grocery store. Like it's going to be stressful. So what you can do is if you get the opportunity, take a few deep breaths before eating. But if not, one of the best things we can do is simply move our food to the ground. Instead of sitting and eating at a table, sitting and eating on the ground. Because what's interesting is that when the majority of our body, like let's just say if you're sitting on the ground, at this point, your legs are in full contact with the floor. Your body can tell, it perceives that about half of the body is on the ground, sitting on a flat surface. That means that you are at rest.
Yeah, we should be resting. Fascinating.
So go to the coffee table, sit with your kids and sit down on the ground where you can still have that disagreement with your toddler, but at least you're getting that biofeedback of that you are
being grounded. Yeah. So fascinating. I think that will be a really helpful trick to try, because at the same time too, I think it makes it less of a maybe fight of trying to get someone to sit down at the table or get the chair, high chair ready. And if you're able to have baby with you, could just sit up or play, then that might be, and make food interactive, then that could be a helpful place to start. So fascinating. I like
Absolutely.
that. You commented also to the chewing part. I've heard that there are specific numbers out there for the number of times that you should chew. Do you generally just start encouraging people like, let's try to just take more bites, or based on what they're eating that you try to have people hit certain numbers with harder foods like walnuts or nuts of some variety? What do you tend to recommend?
If they're up for the challenge, let's just say they do have those times where they have a set lunch hour, they have the opportunity to maybe become more mindful. What I do is I have them just start with putting the fork down in between bites. And so just automatically that simple action will increase the number of chews by 10 to 15 to 20 chews, depending on the person. So to where they're not getting so caught up in counting, just putting the fork down. But then also, like that's a good place to start. And let's just say they achieve that. It's a new habit. They're doing great with it. Then at that point, we encourage like being more feeling more of the texture. At that point, do you feel it that's more of a liquid at this point than a solid? Beautiful big chunks of food that's not chewed up, like then become more of a sensory. But sometimes it's really difficult for people to kind of tap in because they're here in their mind versus in the body. And that's even hard for me. Like I haven't gotten to that place in my life where I can be like, oh, let me be really present and feel how everything feels when I'm not there yet. So it just kind of depends on what works for them. But just the simple fact of putting the fork down can really increase it. And that's more helpful than not.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good place to start. And what about fluids
Mhm.
around meal times? Does drinking ever change either stress response or how that nutrients are absorbed to optimize stress management in regards to fluids intake?
Absolutely. Fluids are great because we want to make sure we're staying hydrated, but we need only just enough to help promote like basically we want to make sure there's at least some liquid to help promote the transit of the food in the digestive
Mhm.
tract, but too much can actually dilute the stomach acid and make the
Hmm.
environment of the stomach a little bit too alkaline to where you then at that point your body's having to work harder to make sure that you're kind of compensating for
Huh.
that. So limiting your drinks to about 6 ounces, no more than 6 ounces per meal is really
Okay.
helpful. It's a good kind of cap to start.
Like
Um,
throughout the meal as you're
mhm,
eating. Okay.
mhm. And
Ooh,
before and after, like an hour, 30 minutes before, after eating, yeah, you can drink some more water, but give your body some time.
okay. That's
Mhm.
helpful to know. What about do you ever feel like fluids, and I'm jumping away from you a little bit, but
Yeah.
like in the morning upon waking, I've
Mhm.
heard not conflicting, just different ideas like lemon water or ginger turmeric or I don't know, oat tea or something. There's all sorts of things. What is there something kind of upon waking that you feel helpful with
Yeah.
uh
Yeah.
eating or
Water in
drinking?
general is great.
Okay,
You want to
water.
go above and beyond. Like there are options. Like some people really like to have something warm to start their day. They just feel like the heat itself can kind of help stimulate digestion, stimulate their appetite. So, doing a cup of warm lemon water or even a tea is perfectly fine. But even if that's not your jam, let's just say your air conditioning's out and you want nothing to do with heat, just lemon water, room temperature is great.
Okay.
I do suggest to my clients that avoiding like really ice cold drinks, like say smoothies, things like that, that cold, the temperature of cold can actually inhibit digestion a little bit. But doing things that are a little more tepid can be better. But
Okay.
so like let's just say if you're doing a smoothie, what I just tell people to do is just actually like take their berries and rinse it underneath the tap to kind of get that chill off of it before blending. And
Uh-huh.
that's enough. That's
Okay. Where it's not like straight from the freezer, frozen strawberries or okay.
fine. But yeah, hydration is great because hydration, whenever we're not hydrated, that actually can contribute to symptoms of stress and anxiety. Just a reduction of 2% overall body hydration levels have been shown to increase anxiety, increase depression, brain fog, contribute to headaches. And so, like, hydration is incredibly important during the season of motherhood, just because even if you don't have a beautiful, clean diet, which is never the goal and never the expectation, but just simply making sure that, your body, 90% of your cells have a significant amount of water in them, making sure that you're replenishing your hydration levels is just critical, especially if you're lactating. That's something that's just not really discussed all the time, but making sure you're drinking water is so important, especially right now in Texas in the middle of the summer.
Oh my gosh, wholeheartedly. I feel like I just can't catch up. I've seen this really great meme out of uh how describing how hot Texas is, and it's like the sun, Texas, the earth. And I'm like, yes, exactly what I feel like.
Yes, really. So just scrape me off the pavement, please. Like,
Yeah, I know. Basically. You commented about warm food or warm fluids, but what about coffee?
mm,
Coffee gets on my hit list every now and then with certain people, depending on acidity and caffeine in regards to bladder function, bowel
mhm,
function sometimes. But what are your thoughts on coffee intake in the mornings?
yeah.
Because I know that I think we touched a little bit on this in our last webinar, but especially for some moms who wake up and are just like, I'm so exhausted. I need my coffee in the morning. And I hear that a lot, like Amethyst, I'm dealing with some bladder stuff, but I'm not willing to give up my coffee right now.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts just about that in general?
Yeah. I think a lot of foods can kind of get in these camps either like this is really great or really awful. And I don't think any food should ever fall in that camp. And I think coffee is one of those foods that can be really great for some people and others not so much. And here, like what this is what I look for. Is one for everybody, for anybody who drinks coffee, making sure that's not the first thing that you drink.
Oops. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
So the reason for that is because the caffeine in it is already dehydrating. And so overnight, you're not drinking water, you're hopefully sleeping to where you're not making sure that you're staying on top of your hydration while you sleep. So you're already waking up mildly dehydrated. So then you're putting caffeine and coffee on top of that. That's only going to contribute to dehydration throughout the day. And so, like, in my mind, whenever we're looking at our day, we want to make sure that we are supporting hydration first thing in the morning, just because of sleep, but then also it supports digestion and it supports our stress levels. But coffee, making sure that comes hopefully after you eat, preferably. Eat your breakfast first. So start your day with a glass of water, glass of tea, lemon water. Start there. Drink it while you're eating breakfast or making breakfast. Then eat your breakfast. And at that point, once you start eating breakfast, making sure that you at least take 1 or 2 bites of food before you take your first sip of coffee. Because caffeine, depending on the person, depending on where they're at in their life in regards to stress hormone production, sleep deprivation, caffeine can actually contribute to more like elevated cortisol or elevated stress hormones. And so making sure that your blood sugar is at least stable by eating breakfast first can help mitigate some of that stress response from all of our adrenals and different kinds of stress hormones that are produced. So making sure your blood sugar is balanced, making sure that you're hydrated, then drinking the coffee can kind of set you up for actually better energy, because there's some really interesting studies out there showing that caffeine actually has some antidepressive benefits, and specifically in women. And so I don't think caffeine should be one of those foods that's villainized. I think as long as you are consuming it safely and then not in excess, and making sure that your adrenals are in a better place. Like if you're someone who has not been sleeping for years and your husband is really a stressful person or your job is really stressful, like having caffeine all of the time probably is not a good fit for you.
Yeah.
1 cup in the morning with breakfast after you've already started hydrating, go for it.
Yeah. I would like to touch in on sleep because you've commented to that quite a bit, and I think it's really valuable too. But before I jump ahead, I've heard you use an acronym before, and that might help kind of guide how we put some of these things together for people to follow along with. Can you share with us what that stands for and how people can follow along?
Yes, it's called SPAN, not spam, but SPAN. And this is actually coined by Dr. I think his name is Andrew or Anthony Saralak. He's the one who coined this term, but basically SPAN stands for sleep, purpose, activity, and nutrition. And these are the 4 pillars I work with most of my clients at some point in our process of working together. But it is my favorite tool to kind of bring some structure and some clarity into these women's lives where they feel like they are just running on empty.
Yeah.
Or they're not there yet, but they're going to be.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do we support the body whenever it gets to this place where you're just so drained physically, mentally, and emotionally, or you just feel like you're a hamster on a wheel and you don't know what to do about it? SPAN can provide some structure and like where to start. You know, sleep is that first one, and I think that really is the most important pillar, but it's also the most difficult because women and mothers are just chronically sleep deprived. So like, what do we do? How can, instead of just saying, well, tell your brand new baby to sleep for the night because I really
we're supposed to be sleeping.
Yeah, we're supposed to be sleeping. You can't do that. So what I do and what we've kind of focused on to where we just know right now, sleeping 8 hours is not feasible. It's not realistic.
Right. Not going to happen.
Working on sleep hygiene can be great because it's at that point you're focusing on like your sleep depth and your sleep quality versus the amount.
To say, I may not have the amount that is recommended, but how can I make the amount I have more valuable?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And there's a lot of ways to do it, but a good place to start would be making sure that you are creating an environment that promotes good sleep. So you can at least have a 10-minute routine before bed that's consistent where you know that you're going to be applying, you know, either like a magnesium lotion or drinking a cup of tea or listening to a sleep meditation on an app, or just even reading a book, or hoping to think that you can, you know, just even the action of opening it with the intention can be relieving for some. And so making sure that you at least have a little bit of a routine, maybe 10 minutes, that's fine. But then also understanding that there are certain aspects to our life that can actually worsen your sleep quality. And one being electronics, the blue light that's emitted from our TVs, from our phones, from our computers. That blue light's really bright. It's very stimulating. Basically, we have a gland called the pineal gland, and it is photosensitive. It can actually, not only through the eyes can it perceive what wavelengths, what light wavelengths we're exposing ourselves to. But basically what happens is that these blue wavelengths, they are the wavelengths that the sun produces at noon, so the most bright time of the day. And that blue light is very stimulatory. It actually tells your body, hey, it's daytime, it's time to be awake. And what's going to be produced to make sure that you stay awake and have energy is cortisol. It's going to be one of your stress hormones. And so making sure that you are avoiding that blue light before bed, at least an hour and a half is better.
Okay.
So either using a red filter, you can actually get, change the red on your phone to where it's actually more of an amber or red tone on your phone, even your computer screen. But you can also use amber glasses. You can get them off Amazon for like $20. If you're someone like me with a prescription, they also make these really charming, super cute. Your husband's gonna love you. They are the dorkiest things I've ever seen. They are these little clip-on amber glasses. They're only $20 and they get the job done to where you can still have your prescription lenses with the amber filter over it. They're incredibly dorky and I love it because you can sleep better.
Will you wear those next time, please?
I can actually, I almost grab them. But yes, next time I will wear them. It's like I'm trying to be Elton John, but not really.
Exactly. Yeah, and a quick note on that. I have a coworker who started using blue light filter glasses. And fortunately, we don't have a lot of screen time at the office, but enough throughout the day.
Sure.
And she's loved them. And I think agreed, changing the filter on your phone or phone setting to change that to sun up and sundown has been really helpful. I've enjoyed that. And it's such an easy, quick thing to do.
It is. And it really does help. But there's other herbs out there, and this is where it gets like super individualized, where at that point, herbs and foods, because some of the things I work on with my clients that we're actually promoting melatonin production. So like one of the best things that you can do is making sure that you're getting the proper minerals and B vitamins you actually need to make melatonin. And so like one of the best foods you can do, especially if you're someone who's lactating, to where, throughout the night, where you're using like an energy, basically your body's using energy while you sleep because you're not sleeping.
Yeah.
Having a small bowl of oatmeal, like preferably steel cut oats, with a little bit of like either butter or ghee if you're lactose sensitive. You can even do just a little drizzle of like coconut oil on top, just a little bit of a fat, with the carbs from the oatmeal, a drizzle of molasses. Molasses is very rich in iron. It's rich in different calming minerals. I think it's a good source of, relatively good source of magnesium. But at that point, between the oats, the molasses, and a little bit of fat, you're getting not only calming minerals, but then you're also getting a little bit of B6. And B6 is what's required to make melatonin. So you're getting the carbohydrates to help keep you through the night steady, keep your blood sugar steady throughout the night. But then you're getting those minerals to help kind of support your nervous system. And so it's actually one of my favorite foods to recommend for people who do feel anxious. The ones that lay in bed and their mind's thinking about what they need to do, what they didn't get done. It's very, very calming.
Super helpful. I definitely need to try that. And I think that's a really great recommendation and pretty straightforward and easy to do for someone who's short on time and or finances. I think that can be really straightforward without feeling too overwhelmed with what supplement to buy or expenses of that.
Right.
It's helpful to know. Is there any?
Yeah. Pakistan. So sleep is that first one, supporting good quality sleep with whatever amount that you get through some lifestyle. But the second is P. So P is for purpose. Are you doing things in your life that make you happy? And, that's always a question that kind of surprises moms, because they're like, well, of course I'm happy. I have my kid. I get to spend time with them, or I get to, I'm a working mom and I get to see my children in the evenings and the weekends. If I found balance, that brings me joy. But what I always encourage is to look a little bit deeper. What gives you a sense of purpose that's beyond motherhood, that's beyond being a partner, that's beyond being a friend, a sister, all the different hats that these women wear. What gives you a sense of purpose? What gives you joy? Is that something that you used to do back in high school or college, whether that was a sport, an activity, volunteering? Was it doing a hobby? Something that just kind of lights you up is so, so important, because we can kind of get lost in the thick of motherhood. You get lost in these new identities and responsibilities, but you have to remember that you are still that person who you were before. and anything, you've changed, you have evolved. And I think the concept of like, oh, I'm starting to feel like how I used to, who I was before. But I really think, and this is everyone's experience of motherhood is different, but I think that, kind of putting this pressure on yourself of being like, oh, I don't feel like myself, I want to feel like how I used to,
Yeah.
that's not realistic, because you're not the same person.
Yeah.
And so learning who you are now. And so some of those things that spark joy and bring you light may have evolved. But ultimately, like, you need to know what gives you pleasure. How can you be happy if you don't know what makes you happy? But finding that again and carving that out into your day, into your week, into your month, and making that like a non-negotiable. This is something that I have carved into my life, can really kind of refill that bucket whenever you just feel depleted. You feel just too stressed. Like, that is almost more energizing and more balancing in regards to stress than diet, than lifestyle, than sleep. Like, if you're just not happy, none of those other puzzle pieces are going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. I really think that's so valuable, and can be so, what I see as a provider, so frustrating, because that there's this piece missing. Like, I can't do my exercises, or I'm unable to, because we're kind of missing this other sense of loss, I think. And I think it's that sense of loss in identity, is to say, I'm not quite sure who I am right now, or what my new role is. And I think sometimes peeling that away, like you said, and finding something that's individual to that person, that is not dependent on someone else, can be really helpful. And you made a comment to talking about an activity in high school. I've read a research article lately that more often than not, the things that bring us that pure joy is something that we did as a hobby as a kid and as a young child too. So I think that's even why probably the adult coloring books became so popular, because that was, such a big part, I think, of kids' lives. And I think that's a helpful inflection to make.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I kind of see that. I've seen that in my clients, but I've also seen that personally. Like, so next to the next letter of activity, some people have always been active. Some others, that's not something that they struggle with. They like the movement. They like the activity. They like getting out of the house to go run or walk. And that's great. And then there's other people like me, to where if I didn't have to exercise or move a day in my life, I'd be so content. I would rather eat super healthy and eat clean and make that my priority than going outside and that's just who I am.
Yeah.
Like, activity is my personal biggest pillar that I struggle with. And so for the other women and mothers that can kind of resonate with me, finding that activity to where it doesn't feel like a chore.
Exercise and a chore. Yeah.
Yeah. That doesn't feel like punishment. Like, I have to go work off all that cake that I ate, or have to go exercise so I can enjoy that cake. Like, that mindset is just, can eat your lunch. So let's not do that. So finding an activity, a form of movement that brings you joy. And I think that even just the simple act of walking is like one of the most underrated forms of exercise out there. Like, it just feels like you're not really doing anything. Well, you're doing a lot. You're promoting a lot of circulation and lymphatic movement, and, building up some muscle tone. That's great. Where if that's all that you do is you just walk, and even if you're just walking because you're cooking and you're chasing a child around, like, don't underestimate the amount of activity that you have to do just because you're a mom.
Oh, wholeheartedly. I preach walking. If I could pick one exercise for the whole entire world, it would be walking for people who could walk. And I think it's just so invaluable. And I can't stress that more, especially the comments, like you said, like, well, I'm just walking, or I feel like I need to do, I don't know, HIIT workouts and CrossFit. And I don't think that's the case necessarily. If that's what you want to return to goal-wise, then great, we're going to get there. But that should not be our expectation for activity if that does not serve you. And walking's a great, great place to start. And especially right now in the thick of heat, as we were talking about, I've been trying to encourage people, like, even in the pool, if you have access to a community pool or an HOA pool, or I've had people even use their hot tub without the heat on, and just to say, like, I'm going to kick in there, I'm going to walk circles in there. And walking forward and back in the pool is such a great way right now just to get that movement or activity in.
Absolutely. And I think knowing what's safe for you, for your body, like women with pelvic floor disorders or diastasis recti, like, I was one of those people where I didn't even realize I had pelvic issues, and I was doing HIIT and crunches and sit-ups and all the things that I shouldn't be doing. And it was awful. By the time I ended up finishing like a 45-minute workout that I was so committed to, I felt like I needed to throw up, like, or
Yeah.
pass out. And no one should ever feel that way.
Hmm.
You know, I think sometimes when we are so caught up in this cycle of stress and different kinds of stress hormones, we can get stress hormones are addictive. Cortisol is addictive. And one of my clients coined the term cortisol junkie, which I've just like loved ever
I
since.
love it.
But cortisol junkie is just this idea that we can, because cortisol is so energizing, it's better than a cup of coffee. It can keep us going all day, to where whenever you're kind of at this level, doing a hit or doing such an intensive cardio to where you feel better afterwards because you're like pushing that envelope even more. Like you're
Mm,
only stressing your nervous system out more. I'm not saying that you can't do it, but if you're someone to where you're not getting that calm and that reset from your stress from your job, stress from your family, that if you're not kind of toning it down, only adding more is going to contribute to elevated stress
just
levels.
accelerate it. Yeah.
So just keeping that in mind. So knowing what's good for your body from a physiological perspective, especially as a mom, if you have kids. So like I always tell my clients, go see a pelvic floor therapist, please, before we figure out what we need to do exercise wise.
Activity wise, yeah.
But then also from like a nervous system and stress perspective, making sure that you're having that restoration first, and that's consistent and that's achievable for you before we add in a hit routine.
Right.
It can be really critical to your basically your recovery from stress.
Wholeheartedly. And the only kind of comment else I'd like to make in regards to activity is I always use the phrase like our body is meant to move and change position throughout the day. And moms are certainly on the move. But I sometimes feel that, especially in instances where time has to be so divided, there's this commitment to like, I'm going to work, so I'm going to sit down and work, and I'm not going to move from this position because I have childcare afterwards, or I want to play with kids. And I always try to encourage to like, I want you to stay focused and committed to your work time or playtime with kid, but that means our body still should shift position throughout the day. So even if you're going from sitting to standing and, standing does alone, we should also sit, we should have variety to that. And when you're running around with kid, like, let's do that. Or if you're carrying, can we carry on the opposite side? Because our body should have variety to it. So I think that activity can really change and conquer a lot of things with one.
Absolutely. No, that's great.
And then N, not M as in spam, but N as in span.
Yes, and it's for nutrition. So like even as like a nutritional therapist, nutrition is still kind of last in the grand scheme of things. But making sure that your food, the food that you're eating, is tailored to you, first off. Every woman, every mother is different. One diet's not going to work for every single person. And so making sure that the food that you're eating, first and foremost, sparks joy. I want it to be pleasurable. I want you to eat foods that make you happy or foods that you want to cook and enjoy. I don't ever recommend rabbit food. Because that's not going to be, yes, maybe from a nutrition perspective, that might be great, but from an enjoyment perspective, no.
Right.
And so making sure that the food that you're eating supports your recovery, because what happens is that pregnancy, childbirth, lactation is such a feat that it's like the most ultimate marathon you will ever experience in your life. And so what happens is there's common nutrient deficiencies that occur once we make another person and bring them into this world. And it's called postnatal depletion. It's just this concept that there are certain nutrient deficiencies that occur that, if unaddressed, can cause a variety of symptoms. And so that's why like women just feel so different. Like some women feel great and others don't. So it can be anything from a mental and emotional, like mood disorders. It can also be physiological. But we also see, increased levels of autoimmunity and different things like thyroid disorders that occur after childbirth that can be not only, but just can be contributed because these nutrient deficiencies weren't addressed to begin with, because you're creating another person. The body is so intelligent. It's going to take from your nutrient stores and give it to baby. So like a good example of that is that about a third of our brain by dry weight is made up of DHA, and DHA is an essential fatty acid, meaning that we cannot make it. We have to get it from food. And we find really good sources of DHA in fish. We can find it in the fish oil supplement. But if we're not consuming either a fish oil supplement or fish on a regular basis, that DHA is in such demand during pregnancy because that DHA is needed to make your baby's brain, to make their nervous system. And so the body is going to take it from you and give it to baby. But considering that a third of your brain by dry weight is DHA, that's your biggest storage site. Yeah. So the fact that you feel so wired all the time, or you have that brain fog, it can be worsened by essential fatty acid deficiency. Not just with this, but then it's also contributed to sleep deprivation and stress, and all of these things, but it's these facets.
Yeah.
And so nutrition is just so important as a general recovery from making another person and bringing them here on this planet, but then also just in life, whenever you're stressed and your cortisol is elevated, that depletes certain nutrients. And just keeping that in mind as you kind of walk through life, knowing what your body is saying to where you can tailor your diet to serve you. But then also eating well and nutrition should be easy, it should be affordable, and it should be enjoyable. And that's what I really am passionate about. And that's what I help women with, because it should be accessible. But nutrition is so, so important for multiple different reasons, but those are just some of them.
Love it. And for any people who are listening or watching and would like to hop back to our first webinar, Varian went over some really great ideas on how to make quick and easy nutritional shifts in our kitchen and starting out with. And I think that's a really great corollary today. So if anyone gets time to listen into that, that'd be really great. It was so good to chat with you.
Thank you. It was good to chat with you as well. I've been really enjoying these.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited. We'll send out information to people, but if there are any other questions that come in, we'll make sure to send them your way. And we really appreciate all of the information you shared for me as a practitioner, but especially for, I think, both of our clients, because there's a big bridge between the two and helping support everything that goes on down there that no one likes to talk about.
Right. No, it's so important, but it's like a fun conversation for us.
Wholeheartedly.
Becoming more accepted, I guess.
I wholeheartedly agree. Well, I hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining us, and we'll chat soon.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye-bye.